Behind every breakthrough is a simple idea, and Operations Management for MBAs, 5th edition, reveals the ones that matter. We will focus on what it says about quality and operations. Stay with me, the best part is near the end. Chapter 1, Process Improvement, Minimizing Variation through Six Sigma. Approaches for Process Improvement: Business Process Design, Reengineering, Six Sigma and the DMAIC Improvement Process. Examples: Six Sigma Project: the define phase, the measure phase, the analyze phase, the improve phase, the control phase. Six Sigma in practice. Chapter 2, Process Improvement, Reducing Waste through Lean. History and philosophy of Lean. Traditional systems compared with Lean. Specify value, identify the value stream, make value flow, pull value through the value stream, pursue perfection. Benefits of Lean. Six Sigma. Chapter 3, Supplement, Forecasting. Forecasting purposes and methods: time series analysis, causal forecasting with regression cases. BPO, Incorporated, Call Center. Six Sigma Project: Peerless Laser Processors. United Lock, Door Hardware Division, A. Hubline, Project Management and Control System. D. Singer Hospital Products Corporation. Automotive Builders Incorporated, the Stanhope Project Index. Preface: the enthusiasm of the users of this MBA-oriented book has been greatly rewarding for us, and we thank them for their comments, suggestions, criticism, and support. Although the book is not the massive seller that an undergraduate textbook can become, it is clear that there is, as we felt, a need for a solely MBA-level text. The book was originally written because of the express need we felt in our many MBA programs at Wake Forest University for an operations management textbook directed specifically to MBA students, and especially to those who had some real-world experience. We tried all of the current texts but found them either tomes that left no time for the cases and other materials we wanted to include, or shorter but simplistic quantitative books. Moreover, all the books were so expensive they did not allow us to order all the cases, readings, and other supplements and class activities, such as the beer game supplement, that we wanted to include in our course. What we were looking for was a short, inexpensive book that would cover just the introductory, basic, and primarily conceptual material. This would allow us, as the professors, to tailor the course through supplementary cases and other materials for the unique class we would be teaching: executive, evening, full-time, short course, and so on. Although we wanted a brief, supplementary type book so that we could add other material, we have colleagues who need a short book because they only have a half-semester module for the topic. Or they may have to include another course, management science or statistics, in the rest of the quarter or semester. In addition, we didn't need the depth of most texts that have 2 extensive chapters on supply chain management, 2 long chapters on scheduling, 2 chapters on quality, and so on. 1 chapter on each topic would be sufficient for our needs. Chapter 4, Changes in this 5th edition. The response to our changes in the previous edition was very positive, especially the addition of a second color, the new organization with fewer but more mainstream chapters, and the inclusion of multiple cases in the rear of the book. One of the major additions in this 5th edition has been to elaborate the flow of the chapters in the book and how these topics contribute to the competitiveness of every organization. Hence, each chapter starts with a diagram depicting where we are in the flow of the text rather than the details of the topics within each chapter, and is then followed by a discussion of how the topic is related to competitiveness. Another major change has been the addition of many new examples to open each chapter that illustrate how the topic is crucial to competitiveness. Within the chapters we have added materials where the reviewers indicated more, or new, discussion was warranted. For example, in Chapter 1 we discuss the current trends in operations such as technology, RFID, and the green/sustainability movement. We also moved the definition of some generic, but crucial to operations, terminology into this first chapter such as efficiency and productivity. And in Chapter 2 we added the processes of assemble to order and engineer to order and added a discussion of services capes. In Chapter 6, we added a discussion of where to place a project in the organizational structure, and the major criteria for selecting a project manager. And finally, in Chapter 7 we updated material about supply chain management in a number of places. We also added some new mini-cases to the rear of 3 chapters that only had one mini-case previously. In revising the book, we have kept the elements of our earlier philosophy. For example, we kept the other majors such as marketing and finance in mind. What did these students need to know about operations to help them in their careers? And we still minimize the heavier quantitative material, keeping only discussions and examples that illustrate a particular concept since finance and marketing majors would not be solving operations problems. Moreover, even operations managers probably wouldn't themselves be solving those problems. More likely, they would be assigned to an analyst. For those chapters in which exercises are included, they are intended only to help illustrate the concept we are trying to convey rather than make experts of the students. We continued to add service examples throughout the text, since the great majority, over 80% these days, of our students would be, or are already, employed in a service organization. And since these students will be working and competing in a highly global economy, we employ many international examples. We also kept the textual flow of material in the chapters away from the current undergraduate trend of fracturing the material flow with sidebars, examples, applications, solved problems, and so forth, in an attempt to keep the students' interest and attention. Given the maturity of MBA students, we instead worked these directly into the discussions to attain a smoother, clearer flow. As noted below, the instructor's manual includes suggestions for readings, cases, videos, and other course supplements that we have found to be particularly helpful for MBA classes, since this book is intended to be only a small part of the MBA class. Chapter 5, Supplements. Our approach to supplementary MBA level material here is to reference and annotate in the instructor's manual additional useful cases, books, video clips, and readings for each of the 8 textbook chapters. The annotation is intended to help the instructor select the most appropriate materials for their unique course. Although we have added some of our own and our colleagues' cases to the rear of this edition, we also rely on our favorite Harvard, Darden, Western Ontario, and European cases, plus Harvard Business Review readings to fully communicate the nature of the chapter topic we are covering. Although we didn't think that test bank questions or PowerPoint slides would be used by most MBA instructors, these materials are available from the publisher also. For that matter, the publisher can also custom bind selected content from this text, our larger undergraduate, or any other, web text, along with cases and articles, should this approach be of interest to the professor. Please contact your local Wiley representative for more details. Chapter 6, Your Inputs Appreciated. We would once again like to encourage users of this book to send us their comments and suggestions. Tell us if there is something we missed that you would like to see in the next edition, or the instructor's manual or website, or if there is perhaps material that is unneeded for this audience. Also, please tell us about any errors you uncover, or if there are other elements of the book you like or don't like. We hope to continue keeping this a living, dynamic project that evolves to meet the needs of the MBA audience, an audience whose needs are also evolving as our economy and society evolve and change. We want to thank the many reviewers of this book and its previous editions: Alexander Ansari, Seattle University; Satya Chakravorty, Kennesaw State University; Okechi Jeffrey Ejekwu, Michael H. Ensby, Clarkson University; James A. Fitzsimmons, University of Texas; Lawrence D. Fredendahl, Clemson University; William C. Geoch, Brigham Young University; Mike Godfrey, University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh; Damodar Galhar, Western Michigan University; Suresh Kumar Goyal, Concordia University, Canada; Hector Guerrero, the College of William and Mary; Robert Handfield, North Carolina State University; Mark Gerard Haug, University of Kansas; Janelle Heineck, Boston University; David Hollingworth, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute; James L. Hoyt, Troy State University; Kendra Ingram, Texas A&M University Commerce; Mehdi Kegabadi, Florida Atlantic University; Casey Kleindienst, California State University Fullerton; Archie Lockamy III, Samford University; Manoj Malhotra, University of South Carolina; Gus Manicherry, California State University Fullerton; Robert F. Marsh, Sacred Heart; Ron McLaughlin, University of Manitoba; Ivor P. Morgan, Babson College; Sungwook Park, California State University Fullerton; Ranga V. Ramasesh, Texas Christian University; Jamie S. Ribera, IES Universidad de Navarra, Spain; Gary D. Scudder, Vanderbilt University; Sue Perat Sifferd, Arizona State University; Samia Siha, Kennesaw State University; Donald E. Simmons, Ithaca College; William J. Talon, Northern Illinois University; Asud J. Vakria, University of Florida; and Jerry C. Way, University of Notre Dame. For this edition we thank the following reviewers: Dennis Battistella, Florida Atlantic University; Linda Brennan, Mercer University; David Cadden, Quinnipiac University; Jimin Huang, Hofstra University; Jonathan Jellin, NUI Poly; Mehdi Kegabadi, Florida Atlantic University; Rob Owen, Thunderbird School of Global Management; Forrest Thornton, River College; Richard Vale, Colorado Mesa University; Jack Zhang, Hofstra University. Chapter 7, N. Perspective. The crucial role that operations plays in the global competitiveness of all organizations. It achieves this through the execution of an operations strategy, discussed here in Chapter 1, devoted to designing, improving, and then executing the production process by which the organization's services and products are created. We discussed the design and control of the process in terms of its planning and design, Chapter 2, and the design of its control, quality, procedures, Chapter 3. For a firm to stay competitive in the global marketplace, the process must be continually improved by reducing the inherent variability of its processes, Chapter 4, and eliminating any and all forms of waste, Chapter 5, which is typically achieved through improvement projects, Chapter 6. Finally, we must execute the process, primarily by managing the supply chain that provides the inputs and outputs for the organization, Chapter 7, and the internal details of the process dealing mainly with capacity and scheduling. Chapter 8, Operations Strategy and Global Competitiveness, describes the global competitive. Improving business processes is also critical to staying competitive in the global marketplace. Chapter 4, Process Improvement, Minimizing Variation through Six Sigma, focuses on the use of the Six Sigma approach to constantly reduce the variations in the processes. Process improvement, reducing waste through lean, offers techniques to further improve business processes by eliminating all forms of waste, thereby saving cost, effort, and time. And to effectively conduct these process improvement projects, Chapter 6, Managing Process Improvement Projects, helps us to execute our improvement plans by using the proven procedures of project management. We illustrate the procedures with a process improvement example, but project management can be applied to many other activities that organizations undertake, especially activities involving change. Finally, we reach the application of all this planning, where the processes are executed. Supply chain management covers a range of topics related to effective supply chain execution, such as management of inventories, enterprise requirements planning, ERP, systems, logistics, and purchasing, capacity, scheduling, and location planning. Covers the major internal details of the production process by which the organization grows and remains competitive. Chapter 9, Introduction. No discussion of global competitiveness would be complete without the inclusion of Apple Incorporated's amazing comeback from its near-death experience over a decade ago. Under the futuristic vision of the late Steve Jobs, the firm has innovated in the electronics market like no firm has ever done before, with high quality and reasonable pricing to bring magical capabilities to small gadgets and overwhelm its competitors. Since 2007, Apple's share price has risen 500%, while the S&P 500 has lost 5%. For example, among the 100 largest Nasdaq-listed companies, known as the Nasdaq 100 Index, Apple's 17% weighting is more than that of Google, Intel, and Amazon combined. And Apple's share price recently shot past $500, resulting in a market capitalization of almost $500 billion and a lock on its position as the largest company in the United States. This example of Apple's uniqueness shows how important operations capabilities in areas such as innovation, quality, customization, and cost can be to an organization's global competitiveness. Cheng and Intindala, 2012. As in sports, numerous intense rivalries exist in the world of business, such as the rivalries between Visa and MasterCard, Microsoft and Apple, Ford and General Motors, Energizer and Duracell, and Nike and Reebok. Certainly any list of top business rivalries would be incomplete without Coke and Pepsi. Interestingly, while these two firms compete in the same industry, one has had considerable success on the important dimension of share price performance while the other's performance has been rather dismal. More specifically, over the 5-year period ending in January 2012, Pepsi's stock price was down while Coke's increased by 51%. The result was that Coke's market capitalization increased $153.5 billion while Pepsi's remained relatively flat at $101 billion. This difference in market capitalization is even more dramatic when one factors in the fact that Pepsi's sales are significantly higher than Coke's $1 billion versus $1 billion in 2010. A question that naturally arises is, what accounts for these very different outcomes? One explanation offered by analysts and critics is that Pepsi simply took its eye off the ball. In particular, while Coke focused its attention on beverages, Pepsi has been distracted by attempting to develop nutritious snacks. One result is that Pepsi Cola went from being the number 2 soda to the number 3 soda behind Coke and Diet Coke. To address its weakened performance, Pepsi's board of directors initiated a strategic review of the company. A variety of opinions have been offered regarding what the outcome of Pepsi's strategic review will be, from reducing its payroll to free up additional resources for marketing its soft drink products to breaking up the company into a beverage company and a snack food company. Estrel 2012. General Motors' market share had been in a long downward decline from about 45% in 1980 to about 20% in 2008 when the entire automotive industry got hit with a powerful one-two punch, throwing all the weakened American automobile producers into chaos. First, in early 2008, extreme gasoline prices killed the truck and SUV market, and then the sudden credit crisis and recession killed the rest of the automobile market. The high cost of debt, unionized labor, and unfunded liabilities, pensions and health care, forced GM and Chrysler to go begging to the government for bailouts, with GM getting a $50 billion lifeline from you taxpayers, for example. By late 2008, GM was burning through billions of dollars of cash every month. One industry analyst calculated that GM's obligations in March of 2009 amounted to $62 billion, 35 times its market capitalization, Denning 2009, p. Finally, both GM and Chrysler had to file for a prepackaged structured bankruptcy. The bankruptcy helped GM to cut its labor costs, get rid of a lot of its debt, get rid of some of its pension and health care obligations, and cut the number of models it was offering to the public. So how did the restructuring work out? In 2011, GM had the largest annual profit, at $1 billion, in its 103-year history, up 62% from 2010. GM's revenues were up 13% on sales of million cars, Chrysler's sales were up 26%, and GM had hired 100,000 workers in each of the previous 5 months. GM's car sales are growing quickly in China as well as North America, and the company now has very little debt, over $38 billion in liquidity, and minimal taxes, as a part of their bankruptcy agreement. This represents a tremendous turnaround in the competitiveness of the U.S. automobile industry. But GM's European business is in trouble, having lost $747 million in 2011, but $2 billion in 2010. So they are currently working with European labor unions to cut capacity and costs and may possibly close factories in England and Germany after 2014, Bennett 2012, Turlep 2012. In contrast to GM, Ford, and Chrysler, Toyota has been plagued with problems for the last couple of years. First, Toyota got hit with multiple quality complaints, forcing global recalls in 2010, then the March 11, 2011, Japanese earthquake and tsunami plus the flooding in Thailand severely crippled their capacity to produce, resulting in a 6% decrease in sales in 2011 to million cars worldwide. Another difficult problem for Toyota, as well as all Japanese exporters, has been the sharp increase in the strength of the yen due to the financial crisis and a global rush into strong, reliable currencies such as the dollar, the yen, and the Swiss franc. Amazingly, the yen strengthened from 120 yen to the dollar prior to the crisis to less than 80 yen, a strengthening of over 1/3. Imagine trying to sell cars for 1/3 more than you've been selling them for. Obviously, Toyota and other exporters are trying to hold down their price increases, but at tremendous cost to their profits. Bennett, 2012, Takabashi, 2011. Having rung up combined profits of $8 billion in 2004, manufacturers of flat-panel TVs appeared to be especially optimistic about the profit potential for the TV market in the years ahead. Indeed, a battle of epic proportions was brewing in the consumer electronics industry. On one side was a group of Asian manufacturers that spent $35 billion adding flat panel capacity in 2004 and 2005. The Asian players included a joint venture between LG Electronics and Royal Philips Electronics that invested $1 billion to build the world's largest liquid crystal display factory, a $2 billion joint venture between Sony and Samsung to produce LCDs, and Matsushita Electronics' new $1 billion plant for producing chips for thin TVs. On the other side, North America's Dell was attempting to leverage its streamlined supply chain and direct sales model and thereby shift the basis of competition from features to price. For example, in the fall of 2004, Dell introduced a high-definition 42-inch plasma TV for under $3,000 while the similar offerings of its Asian competitors were still priced above $4,000. As a result, Dell was able to capture 10% of the market in a span of only a couple of months. So would the Asian strategy based on product innovation and appealing designs win out over Dell's strategy that seeks to commoditize the market and thereby shift the basis of competition to price? Einhorn 2005. Fast forward to 2007 and the flat panel sets have now overtaken the CRT sets, with LCD sets taking a commanding lead of 58% of the market by the fourth quarter of 2008. CRTs with a 34% share, and plasma with an 8% share. In addition, the market jumped from an $11 billion industry in 1998 to $102 billion in 2007, just 10 years. And the winners are Samsung and Sony, each with about a 13% share of the market. Vizio is a close runner-up with 11%, and then Sharp with 8%. However, the future does not look quite as rosy as it did in 2004. Most of the consumers who wanted a flat panel set now have one. Multiple low-end producers have entered the market and kept prices low, and the recession resulted in a 3% drop in sales as of January 2009, http://news. CNET. com/8301-10784_3-9891583-7. HTML. These brief examples highlight the diversity and importance of operations while providing a glimpse of two themes that are central to operations: customer satisfaction and competitiveness. They also illustrate a more subtle point that improvements made in operations can simultaneously increase customer satisfaction and lower costs. The Apple example demonstrates how a company obtained a substantial competitive advantage by improving their innovation capability, their production process, and their supply chain. The American automobile industry example shows how losing an operations focus can drive a firm into bankruptcy, but how, through restructuring, the firm can regain its operational competitiveness. The Pepsi example illustrates a fundamental principle in strategy and competitiveness, namely, that organizations that focus on doing a few things will usually outperform organizations that lack this focus. The Toyota example further illustrates how losing your focus on your strengths, plus bad luck in terms of global financial and natural crises, can damage your competitiveness. And the Apple and flat panel TV examples demonstrate how quickly technology can upend an industry and change the major players and their competitiveness. Today, in our international marketplace, consumers purchase their products from the provider that offers them the most value for their money. To illustrate, you may be doing your course assignments on a Japanese notebook computer, driving a German automobile, or watching a sitcom on a TV made in Taiwan while cooking your food in a Korean microwave. However, most of your services, banking, insurance, personal care, are probably provided domestically, although some of these may also be owned by, or outsourced to, foreign corporations. There is a reason why most services are produced by domestic firms while products may be produced in part, or wholly, by foreign firms, and it concerns an area of business known as operations. A great many societal changes that are occurring today intimately involve activities associated with operations. For example, there is great pressure among competing nations to increase their exports. And businesses are intent on building efficient and effective supply chains, improving their processes through Six Sigma and successfully applying the precepts of lean management and other operations-based programs. Another characteristic of our modern society is the explosion of new technology, an important aspect of operations. Technologies such as smartphones, email, notebook computers, tablets, and the web, to name a few, are profoundly affecting business and are fundamentally changing the nature of work. For example, many banks are shifting their focus from building new branch locations to using the web as a way to establish and develop new customer relationships. Banks rely on technology to carry out more routine activities as well, such as transferring funds instantly across cities, states, and oceans. Our industries also rely increasingly on technology. Robots carry and weld parts together, and workerless, dark factories of the future turn out a continuing stream of products. And soft operations technologies, such as supply chain management and lean production, Feld 2000, Womack and Jones 2003, have transformed world markets and the global economy. This exciting, competitive world of operations is at the heart of every organization and, more than anything else, determines whether the organization survives in the international marketplace or disappears into bankruptcy or a takeover. It is this world that we will be covering in the following chapters. Chapter 10, Operations. Why do we argue that operations be considered the heart of every organization? Fundamentally, organizations exist to create value, and operations is the part of the organization that creates value for the customer. Michael Hammer, 2004, maintains that operational innovation can provide organizations with long-term strategic advantages over their competitors. Regardless of whether the organization is for profit or not for profit, primarily service or manufacturer, public or private, it exists to create value. Thus, even non-profit organizations like the Red Cross strive to create value for the recipients of their services in excess of their costs. Moreover, this has always been true, from the earliest days of bartering to modern-day corporations. Consider McDonald's as an example. This firm uses a number of inputs, including ingredients, labor, equipment, and facilities, transforms them in a way that adds value to them, by frying, and obtains an output, such as a chicken sandwich, that can be sold at a profit. This conversion process, termed a production system, is illustrated in. The elements of the figure represent what is known as a System 1, a purposeful collection of people, objects, and procedures for operating within an environment. Note the word purposeful. Systems are not merely arbitrary groupings but goal-directed or purposeful collections. Managing and running a production system efficiently and effectively is at the heart of the operations activities that will be discussed in this text. Since we will be using this term throughout the text, let us formally define it. Operations is concerned with transforming inputs into useful outputs according to an agreed-upon strategy and thereby adding value to some entity. This constitutes the primary activity of virtually every organization. Not only is operations central to organizations, it is also central to people's personal and professional activities, regardless of their position. People, too, must operate productively, adding value to inputs and producing quality outputs, whether those outputs are information, reports, services, products, or even personal accomplishments. Thus, operations should be of major interest to every reader, not just professionally but also personally. The production system. Systems perspective as illustrates, a production system is defined in terms of the environment, a strategy, a set of inputs, the transformation process, the outputs, and some mechanism for controlling the overall system. The strategy includes such elements as what customers value, the vision and mission of the organization, an appropriate framework to execute this vision, and the core capabilities of the organization. We discuss the strategy in detail a bit later. The environment includes those things that are outside the actual production system but that influence it in some way. Because of its influence, we need to consider the environment, even though it is beyond the control of decision makers within the system. For example, a large portion of the inputs to a production system are acquired from the environment. Also, government regulations related to pollution control and workplace safety affect the transformation system. Think about how changes in customers' needs, a competitor's new product, or a new advance in technology can influence the level of satisfaction with a production system's current outputs. As these examples show, the environment exerts a great deal of influence on the production system. Because the world around us is constantly changing, it is necessary to monitor the production system and take action when the system is not meeting its strategic goals. Of course, it may be that the current strategy is no longer appropriate, indicating a need to revise the strategy. On the other hand, it may be found that the strategy is fine but that the inputs or transformation processes, or both, should be modified in some way. In either case, it is important to continuously collect data from the environment, the transformation processes, and the outputs, compare that data to the strategic plan, and, if substantial deviations exist, design and implement improvements to the system or perhaps the strategy, so that results agree with the strategic goals. Thinking in terms of systems provides decision makers with numerous advantages. To begin with, the systems perspective focuses on how the individual components that make up a system interact. Thus, the systems perspective provides decision makers with a broad and complete picture of an entire situation. Furthermore, the systems perspective emphasizes the relationships between the various system components. Without considering these relationships, decision makers are prone to a problem called suboptimization. Suboptimization occurs when one part of the system is improved to the detriment of other parts of the system and, perhaps, the organization as a whole. For example, if a retailer decides to broaden its product line in an effort to increase sales, this could actually end up hurting the retailer as a whole if it does not have sufficient shelf space or service personnel available to accommodate the broader product line. Thus, decisions need to be evaluated in terms of their effect on the entire system, not simply in terms of how they will affect one component of the system. In the remainder of this section, we elaborate on inputs, the transformation processes, and outputs. In later sections and chapters, we further discuss both strategy and elements of the control system in more detail. Inputs. The set of inputs used in a production system is more complex than might be supposed and typically involves many other areas such as marketing, finance, engineering, and human resource management. Obvious inputs include facilities, labor, capital, equipment, raw materials, and supplies. Supplies are distinguished from raw materials by the fact that they are not usually a part of the final output. Oil, paper clips, pens, tape, and other such items are commonly classified as supplies because they only aid in producing the output. Another very important but perhaps less obvious input is knowledge of how to transform the inputs into outputs. The employees of the organization hold this knowledge. Finally, having sufficient time to accomplish the operations is always critical. Indeed, the operations function quite frequently fails in its task because it cannot complete the transformation activities within the required time limit. Transformation processes. The transformation processes are the part of the system that adds value to the inputs. Value can be added to an entity in a number of ways. Four major ways are described here. Alter, something can be changed structurally. That would be a physical change, and this approach is basic to manufacturing industries, where goods are cut, stamped, formed, assembled, and so on. We then go out and buy the shirt, or computer, or whatever the good is. But it need not be a separate object or entity. For example, what is altered may be us. We might get our hair cut, or we might have our appendix removed. Other, more subtle, alterations may also have value. Sensual alterations, such as heat when we are cold, or music, or beauty may be highly valued on certain occasions. Beyond this, even psychological alterations can have value, such as the feeling of worth from obtaining a college degree or the feeling of friendship from a long-distance phone call. Transport, an entity, again including ourselves, may have more value if it is located somewhere other than where it currently is. We may appreciate having things brought to us, such as flowers, or removed from us, such as garbage. Store, the value of an entity may be enhanced for us if it is kept in a protected environment for some period of time. Some examples are stock certificates kept in a safe deposit box, our pet boarded at a kennel while we go on vacation, or ourselves staying in a hotel. Inspect, last, an entity may be more valued because we better understand its properties. This may apply to something we own, plan to use, or are considering purchasing, or, again, even to ourselves. Medical exams, elevator certifications, and jewelry appraisals fall into this category. Thus, we see that value may be added to an entity in a number of different ways. The entity may be changed directly, in space, in time, or even just in our mind. Additionally, value may be added using a combination of these methods. To illustrate, an appliance store may create value by both storing merchandise and transporting, delivering it. There are other, less frequent, ways of adding value as well, such as by guaranteeing something. These many varieties of transformations, and how they are managed, constitute some of the major issues to be discussed in this text. Outputs. Two types of outputs commonly result from a production process: services and products. Generally, products are physical goods, such as a personal computer, and services are or non-physical. More specifically, we can consider the characteristics in to help us distinguish between the two. However, this classification may be more confusing than helpful. For example, consider a pizza delivery chain. Does this organization produce a product or provide a service? If you answered a service, suppose that instead of delivering its pizzas to the actual consumer, it made the pizzas in a factory and sold them in the frozen food section of grocery stores. Clearly, the actual process of making pizzas for immediate consumption or to be frozen involves basically the same tasks, although one may be done on a larger scale and use more automated equipment. The point is, however, that both organizations produce a pizza, and defining one organization as a service and the other as a manufacturer seems to be a little arbitrary. In addition, both products and services can be produced as commodities or individually customized. Characteristics of products and services. We avoid this ambiguity by adopting the point of view that any physical entity accompanying a transformation that adds value is a facilitating good, e.g., the pizza. In many cases, of course, there may be no facilitating good. We refer to these cases as pure services. The advantage of this interpretation is that every transformation that adds value is simply a service, either with or without facilitating goods. If you buy a piece of lumber, you have not purchased a product. Rather, you have purchased a bundle of services, many of them embodied in a facilitating good, a tree-cutting service, a sawmill service, a transportation service, a storage service, and perhaps even an advertising service that told you where lumber was on sale. We refer to these services as a bundle of benefits, of which some are tangible, the sawed length of lumber, the type of tree, and others are intangible, courteous sales clerks, a convenient location, payment by charge card. Some services may, of course, even be negative, such as an audit of your tax return. In summary, services are bundles of benefits, some of which may be tangible and others intangible, and they may be accompanied by a facilitating good or goods. Firms often run into major difficulties when they ignore this aspect of their operations. They may think of, and even market themselves as, a lumberyard and not as providing a bundle of services. They may recognize that they have to include certain tangible services, such as cutting lumber to the length desired by the customer, but ignore the intangible services, charge sales, having a sufficient number of clerks. Another reason for not making a distinction between manufacturing and services is that when a company thinks of itself as a manufacturer, it tends to focus on measures of internal performance such as efficiency and utilization. But when companies consider themselves as providing services, they tend to focus externally and ask questions such as how can we serve our customers better? This is not to imply that improving internal performance measures is not desirable. Rather, it suggests that improved customer service should be the primary impetus for all improvement efforts. It is generally not advisable to seek internal improvements if these improvements do not ultimately lead to corresponding improvements in customer service and customer satisfaction. In this text we will adopt the point of view that all value-adding transformations, i.e., operations, are services, and there may or may not be a set of accompanying facilitating goods. How the tangible product, or facilitating good, portion and the intangible service portion for a variety of outputs contribute to the total value provided by each output. The outputs shown range from virtually pure services to what would be known as products. For example, the plush restaurant appears to be about 75% service and 25% product. Although we work with products as extensively as with services throughout the chapters in this book, bear in mind that in these cases we are working with only a portion of the total service, the facilitating good. In general, we will use the nonspecific term outputs to mean either products or services. The range from services to products. One particular type of output that is substantially different from products and many other types of services is that of knowledge or information. These outputs often have the characteristic that the more they are used, the more valuable they become. For example, in a network, the more entities that belong to the network, the more useful it may be. If you are on Facebook or use email, the more other people that are also there, the more valuable it is to you. And when you share this output, you don't lose anything, you gain. Some other characteristics of information or knowledge that differ from normal goods and services are listed below. Giving or selling the information/knowledge to someone doesn't mean you can't give or sell it to someone else. The information/knowledge doesn't wear out. The information/knowledge isn't subject to the law of diminishing returns. The information/knowledge can be replicated at minimal cost and trouble. The more the knowledge is used, the more valuable it becomes. Control. Suppose that in our production system we make a mistake. We must be able to observe this through, for example, accounting records, measurement data, compare it to standard to see how serious the error is, and then, if needed, plan and implement, usually via a project, some improvements. If the changes are not significantly affecting the outputs, then no control actions are needed. But if they are, management must intercede and apply corrective control to alter the inputs or the transformation processes and, thereby, the outputs. The control activities illustrated in are used extensively in systems, including management systems, and will be encountered throughout this text. A few examples of some components of the production system for a variety of common organizations. Operations activities. Operations include not only those activities associated specifically with the production system but also a variety of other activities. For example, purchasing or procurement activities are concerned with obtaining many of the inputs needed in the production system. Similarly, shipping and distribution are sometimes considered marketing activities and sometimes considered operations activities. Because of the important interdependencies of these activities, many organizations are attempting to manage these activities as one process commonly referred to as supply chain management. As organizations begin to adopt new organizational structures based on business processes and abandon the traditional functional organization, it is becoming less important to classify activities as operations or non-operations, e.g., sales, marketing, accounting. However, to understand the tasks more easily, we divide the field of operations into a series of subject areas. These areas are quite interdependent, but to make their workings more understandable, we discuss them as though they were easily separable from each other. In some areas, a full-fledged department may be responsible for the activities, such as quality control or scheduling, but in other areas the activities, such as facility location, may be infrequent and simply assigned to a particular group or project team. Moreover, some of the sub-areas such as supply chain management or maintenance are critically important because they are a part of a larger business process or because other areas depend on them. Finally, since we consider all operations to be services, these subject areas are equally applicable to organizations that have traditionally been classified as manufacturers and services. Examples of production system components. Trends in operations. As has been previously discussed in this chapter and will be further emphasized in the remaining chapters, an organization's operations play a critical role in its overall competitiveness and long-term success. Given the critical role played by operations, it is important to stay abreast of the significant trends in the operations area as well as general trends that may impact the operations function. Major subject areas in operations. As in other disciplines, technology is having a significant impact on the practice of operations. For example, communication technologies such as the Internet are greatly facilitating the ability of organizations to share real-time information with their suppliers and customers. Having more timely information enhances the opportunities for supply chain partners to coordinate and integrate their operations, which ultimately leads to a more effective and efficient supply chain that benefits both the end customer and the trading partners in the supply chain. One exciting technology that promises to greatly enhance the ability of organizations to have real-time information on their inventory and other assets is radio frequency identification, or RFID. RFID tags are attached to individual inventory items, and these tags transmit identification and location information. For example, by attaching an RFID tag to a part, its progress through the production process can be monitored and, when finished, its location in the warehouse tracked. RFID tags are classified as passive or active. Passive RFID tags contain no power source and therefore rely on the power source of an RFID reader to transmit their information. Active RFID tags contain a power source such as a battery and use this power source to periodically transmit a signal that provides identification information. Perhaps the greatest challenge to greater adoption of RFID tags is the cost of the tags themselves. As with other technologies, the cost of RFID has decreased dramatically and is expected to continue on this trajectory. In 2011, the cost of passive RFID tags ranged from $1 to $, depending on the volume of tags purchased and the environmental factors they were designed to withstand. The cost of active RFID tags typically ranges between $50 and $100. Thus, at present, the costs of active RFID tags are justified only for tracking expensive assets such as a rail car or delivery truck. Beyond technology, another important trend impacting the practice of operations management is increasing levels of concern for the environment. Addressing environmental concerns impacts virtually all aspects of operations management, from the design of the organization's output to the sourcing of parts, the distribution of the product, and even the disposal or recycling of the product or its components once it reaches the end of its useful life. Green sourcing, for example, seeks to identify suppliers in such a way that the organization's carbon footprint and overall impact on the environment is minimized. Reducing the waste associated with products is another top priority of organizations that seek to minimize the negative impact they have on the environment. In this case, organizations can deploy a strategy often referred to as the 3 Rs: reduce, reuse, and recycle. As its name suggests, the reduce strategy seeks to decrease the amount of waste associated with a product. One way to accomplish this is to minimize the amount of product packaging used. In services, switching to electronic copies of documents helps reduce waste, such as when a bank switches to electronic statements. Reuse is a second strategy for minimizing waste. The idea underlying reuse is to identify alternative uses for an item after its initial use. For example, there are kits available for converting old computer monitors into fish aquariums. Finally, recycling involves using the materials from old products to create new products. For example, many greeting cards are made from recycled paper. Chapter 11. Customer value. Costs. In the introduction to this chapter, we mentioned that customers support the provider of goods and services who offers them the most value. In this section, we elaborate on this concept. The equation for value is conceptually clear: value equals perceived benefits/costs. The perceived benefits can take a wide variety of forms, but the costs are usually more straightforward: the upfront monetary investment, other monetary life cycle costs of using the service or product, such as maintenance, the hassles involved in obtaining the product or service, such as travel required, obtaining financing, the friendliness of service, and so on. The cost to the customer is, of course, the price paid. But this is usually highly correlated with the cost of producing the service or product, which is itself largely based on the efficiency of the production process. Efficiency is always measured as output/input. For example, a standard automobile engine that uses gasoline is usually about 15 to 20% efficient, that is, the energy put into the engine in terms of gasoline versus the energy put out in terms of automobile motion. However, electric and jet engines are more efficient, and rocket engines can reach almost 70% efficiency. The primary method of attaining efficiency in production is through high productivity, which is normally defined as output per worker hour. This definition of productivity is actually what is known as a partial factor measure of productivity, in the sense that it considers only worker hours as the productive factor. Although in the past, labor often constituted as much as 50% of the cost of a product or even more for a service, it is now frequently as little as 5%, so labor productivity is no longer a good measure of efficiency. Clearly, labor productivity could easily be increased by substituting machinery for labor, but that doesn't mean that this is a wise, or even cost-saving, decision. A multi-factor productivity measure uses more than a single factor, such as both labor and capital. Obviously, the different factors must be measured in the same units, such as dollars. An even broader gauge of productivity, called total factor productivity, is measured by including all the factors of production labor, capital, materials, and energy in the denominator. This measure is to be preferred in making any comparisons of productivity for efficiency or cost purposes. Last, we also frequently hear of effectiveness, which is a measure of the achievement of goals, where efficiency is sometimes considered to be doing the thing right. Effectiveness is instead considered to be doing the right thing or being focused on the proper task or goal. Benefits. In contrast to the role of costs in the customer's value equation, the benefits can be multiple. We will consider 5 of these in detail: innovativeness, functionality, quality, customization, and responsiveness. Innovativeness. Many people, called early adopters in marketing, will buy products and services simply because they are so innovative, or major improvements over what has been available formerly. It is the field of research and development, known as R&D, that is primarily responsible for developing innovative new product and service ideas. R&D activities focus on creating and developing, but not producing, the organization's outputs. On occasion, R&D also creates new production methods by which outputs, either new or old, may be produced. Research itself is typically divided into 2 types, pure and applied. Pure research is simply working with basic technology to develop new knowledge. Applied research is attempting to develop new knowledge along particular lines. For example, pure research might focus on developing a material that conducts electricity with zero resistance, whereas applied research could focus on further developing this material to be used in products for customers. Development is the attempt to utilize the findings of research and expand the possible applications, often consisting of modifications or extensions to existing outputs to meet customers' interests. The range of applicability of development as the output becomes more clearly defined. In the early years of a new output, development is oriented toward removing bugs, increasing performance, improving quality, and so on. In the middle years, options and variants of the output are developed. In the later years, development is oriented toward extensions of the output that will prolong its life. Unfortunately, the returns from R&D are frequently meager, whereas the costs are great. The mortality curve, fallout rate, associated with the concurrent design, evaluation, and selection for a hypothetical group of 50 potential chemical products, assuming that the 50 candidate products are available for consideration in year 3. The first 3 years, on the average, are required for the necessary research preceding each candidate product. Initial evaluation and screening reduce the 50 to about 22, and economic analysis further reduces the number to about 9. Development reduces this number even more, to about 5, and design and testing reduce it to perhaps 3. By the time construction, for production, market development, and a year's commercialization are completed, there is only one successful product left. Sometimes there are none. One study found that, beyond this, only 64% of the new products brought to market were successful, or about 2 out of 3. The development effort. Mortality curve of chemical product ideas from research to commercialization. Source: adapted from This is DuPont 30, Wilmington, Delaware, by permission of DuPont de Nemours and Company. 2 alternatives to research frequently used by organizations are imitation of a proven new idea, i.e., employing a second-to-market strategy, or outright purchase of someone else's invention. The outright purchase strategy is becoming extremely popular in those industries where bringing a new product to market can cost huge sums, such as pharmaceuticals and high technology. It is also employed in those industries where technology advances so rapidly that there isn't enough time to employ a second-to-market strategy. Although imitation does not put the organization first in the market with the new product or service, it does provide an opportunity to study any possible defects in the original product or service and rapidly develop a better design, frequently at a better price. The second approach, purchasing an invention or the inventing company itself, eliminates the risks inherent in research, but it still requires the company to develop and market the product or service before knowing whether it will be successful. Either route spares the organization the risk and tremendous cost of conducting the actual research leading up to a new invention or improvement. In addition to product research, as it is generally known, there is also process research, which involves the generation of new knowledge concerning how to produce outputs. Currently, the production of many familiar products out of plastic, toys, pipe, furniture, etc., is an outstanding example of successful process research. Motorola, to take another example, extensively uses project teams that conduct process development at the same time as product development. Functionality. Many people confuse functionality with quality, discussed next. But functionality involves the activities the product or service is intended to perform, thereby providing the benefits to the customer. A contemporary example is the ubiquitous cell phone. These days it is probably rare to find a cell phone that is only a phone. Many phones include a camera and a way to send its picture to another person, or provide access to the internet, as well as a myriad of other functions. However, many products, especially electronics, but also some services, may be advertised to provide purchasers with a new, unique function, and they may do so, but it may not work well or for long. The former involves performance and the latter has to do with reliability. Clearly, these are different attributes of the output, and one can be well addressed while others disappoint. Our discussion of quality, next, elaborates a bit more on the distinction between these attributes. Quality is a relative term, meaning different things to different people at different times. Moreover, quality is not an absolute but, rather, is based on customers' perceptions. Customers' impressions can be influenced by a number of factors, including brand loyalty and an organization's reputation. Quality dimensions. Richard J. Schonberger has compiled a list of multiple quality dimensions that customers often associate with products and services. Conformance to specifications. Conformance to specifications is the extent to which the actual product matches the design specifications, such as a pizza delivery shop that consistently meets its advertised delivery time of 30 minutes. Performance. Customers frequently equate the quality of products and services with their performance. Note, however, that this dimension may in some cases actually refer to functionality. Examples of performance include how quickly a sports car accelerates or the battery life of a cell phone. Features. Features are the options that a product or service offers, such as side impact airbags or leather seats in automobiles. Again, however, this dimension may also be confused with functionality. Quick response. Quick response is associated with the amount of time required to react to customers' demands. However, we consider this to be a separate benefit, discussed further below. Reliability. Reliability is the probability that a product or service will perform as intended on any given trial or for some period of time, such as the probability that a car will start on any given morning. Durability. Durability refers to how tough a product is, such as a notebook computer that still functions after being dropped or a knife that can cut through steel and not need sharpening. Serviceability. Serviceability refers to the ease with which maintenance or a repair can be performed. Aesthetics. Aesthetics are factors that appeal to human senses, such as the taste of a steak or the sound of a sports car's engine. Humanity. Humanity has to do with how the customer is treated, such as a private university that maintains small classes so students are not treated like numbers by its professors. It is worth noting that not all the dimensions of quality are relevant to all products and services. Thus, organizations need to identify the dimensions of quality that are relevant to the products and services they offer. Market research about customers' needs is the primary input for determining which dimensions are important. Of course, measuring the quality of a service can often be more difficult than measuring the quality of a product or facilitating good. However, the dimensions of quality described above apply to both. Quality's benefits and costs. Many benefits are associated with providing products and services that have high quality. Obviously, customers are more pleased with a high-quality product or service. They are more apt to encourage their friends to patronize the firm, as well as giving the firm their own repeat business. Top quality also establishes a reputation for the firm that is very difficult to obtain in any other manner, and it allows the firm to charge a premium price. And, typically, high-quality products and services are not only the most profitable but also garner the largest market shares. High quality also tends to protect the firm from competitors, who may have to offer competing outputs at an especially low price, and low margins. It also enhances the attractiveness of follow-up products or services so that their chances of success are much improved. And, of course, high quality minimizes risks to safety and health and reduces liability for the firm. Traditionally, it was thought that making products and services of excellent quality would translate into higher costs. Of course, this view neglects the negative consequences of gaining a reputation for producing shoddy outputs. Also, the Japanese have demonstrated that it is often possible to improve quality and lower costs at the same time. One explanation for this phenomenon is that it is simply cheaper to do a job right the first time than to try to fix it or rework it later. And if quality is built into the production system, it improves workers' morale, reduces scrap and waste, smooths workflows, improves control, and reduces a wide variety of other costs. As a result, Philip Crosby, a well-known quality consultant, maintains that quality is free, as in the title of his book, Quality is Free, 1979, which sold approximately 1 million copies. Crosby estimates that firms can lose up to 25% of the amount of their sales because of poor quality. Two primary sets of costs are involved in quality: control costs and failure costs. The aggregate of these costs runs between 15 and 35% of sales for many U.S. firms. Traditionally, these costs are broken down into 4 categories: prevention costs, including planning, training, product design, maintenance, appraisal costs, measuring, testing, test equipment, inspectors, reports, internal costs of defects, extra labor and materials to repair, scrap, rework interruptions, expediting, and external costs of defects, ill will, complaints, quick response to correct, warranties, insurance, recalls, lawsuits. The first 2 costs are incurred in attempting to control quality, and the last 2 are the costs of failing to control quality. Costs of defects, or nonconformance, can run from 50 to 90% of the total cost of quality. Evolution of quality, Japan versus America. Although you might think that made in Japan signifies a product of superior quality, it may surprise you to learn that many of the techniques and philosophies Japanese companies employ today were actually developed in the United States, many around the end of World War II. Unfortunately, the sentiment among U.S. manufacturers at the end of World War II was that they already produced the highest quality products in the world at the lowest cost. Thus, they were not particularly interested in or concerned with improving quality. Japan was an entirely different story. Its products had a reputation for poor quality, and after it lost the war, its economy was a shambles. As a result, Japanese manufacturers were eager for help related to quality improvement. In 1950, the Japanese government invited W. Edwards Deming, then a professor at New York University, to give a series of lectures on quality control to help Japanese engineers reindustrialize the country. But Deming insisted that the heads of the companies attend the talks, too. As a result, the top Japanese managers were also invited, and they all showed up. According to Deming, 1986, the major cause of poor quality is variation. Thus, a key tenet of Deming's approach is to reduce variability in the process. This topic is discussed further in Chapter 4. Deming stressed that improving quality was the responsibility of top management. However, he also believed that all employees should be trained in the use of problem-solving tools, especially statistical techniques. Deming believed that improvements in quality create a chain reaction in which improved quality leads to lower costs, which then translate into higher productivity. In contrast to Deming, Crosby focused more on management, organizational processes, and changing corporate culture than on the use of statistical techniques. Deming promised the Japanese that if they followed his advice, they would be able to compete with the West within just a few years. They did. Now the most prestigious industrial quality award given in Japan each year is named the Deming Prize. But the Japanese did not stop there. They tied the concept of quality control directly into their production system, and now they have even tied it into their entire economy through inspections to guarantee the quality of exports. The natural inclinations of Japanese culture and traditions were exploited in this quality crusade. After nearly 2 decades of a national emphasis on quality, Japan's reputation for producing shoddy goods was totally reversed. And when high quality is combined with competitive pricing, another strength of the Japanese system, the result is extremely strong competition for existing producers. A more recent concept, similar to zero defects, that the Japanese and some American firms have embraced is called total quality management, TQM, or total quality control, TQC. The basic idea of TQM is that it is extremely expensive to inspect quality into a company's outputs and much more efficient and effective to produce them right in the first place. As a result, responsibility for quality has been taken away from the quality control department and placed where it belongs with the workers who produce the parts or provide the service in the first place. This is called quality at the source. It is the heart of statistical quality control, SQC, sometimes called statistical process control, SPC, which we discuss further in Chapter 3. Customization refers to offering a product or service exactly suited to a customer's desires or needs. However, there is a range of accommodation to the customer's needs. At the left, there is the completely standard, world-class, excellence suitable for all markets, product or service. Moving to the right is the standard with options, continuing on to variants and alternative models, and ending at the right with made-to-order customization. In general, the more customization the better if it can be provided quickly, with acceptable quality and cost. Continuum of customization. Flexibility, however, to offer customization demands flexibility on the part of the firm. Professor David Upton, 1994, formerly of the Harvard Business School, defines flexibility as the ability to change or react with little penalty in time, effort, cost, or performance, p. There are more than a dozen different types of flexibility that we will not pursue here: design, volume, routing through the production system, product mix, and many others. But having the right types of flexibility can offer the following major competitive advantages. Faster matches to customers' needs because changeover time from one product or service to another is quicker. Closer matches to customers' needs, ability to supply the needed items in the volumes required for the markets as they develop. Faster design to market time to meet new customer needs. Lower cost of changing production to meet needs. Ability to offer a full line of products or services without the attendant cost of stocking large inventories. Ability to meet market demands even if delays develop in the production or distribution process. Mass customization. Until recently, it was widely believed that producing low-cost standard products, at the far left required one type of transformation process, and producing higher-cost customized products, far right, required another type of process. However, in addition to vast improvements in operating efficiency, an unexpected byproduct of the continuous improvement programs of the 1980s was substantial improvement in flexibility. Indeed, prior to this, efficiency and flexibility were thought to be trade-offs. Increasing efficiency meant that flexibility had to be sacrificed, and vice versa. Thus, with the emphasis on continuous improvement came the realization that increasing operating efficiency could also enhance flexibility. For example, many manufacturers initiated efforts to reduce the amount of time required to set up, or change over, equipment when switching from the production of one product to another. Obviously, all time spent setting up equipment is wasteful, since the equipment is not being used during this time to produce outputs that ultimately create revenues for the organization. Consequently, improving the amount of time a resource is used productively directly translates into improved efficiency. Interestingly, these same reductions in equipment setup times also resulted in improved flexibility. Specifically, with shorter equipment setup times, manufacturers could produce economically in smaller size batches, making it easier to switch from the production of one product to another. In response to the discovery that efficiency and flexibility can be improved simultaneously and may not have to be traded off, the strategy of mass customization emerged. See Pine 1993, Gilmore and Pine 1997. Organizations pursuing mass customization seek to produce low-cost, high-quality outputs in great variety. Of course, not all products and services lend themselves to being customized. This is particularly true of commodities, such as sugar, gas, electricity, and flour. On the other hand, mass customization is often quite applicable to products characterized by short life cycles, rapidly advancing technology, or changing customer requirements. However, recent research suggests that successfully employing mass customization requires an organization to first develop a transformation process that can consistently deliver high-quality outputs at a low cost. With this foundation in place, the organization can then seek ways to increase the variety of its offerings while at the same time ensuring that quality and cost are not compromised. In an article published in the Harvard Business Review, Gilmore and Pine, 1997, identified 4 mass customization strategies: collaborative customizers. These organizations establish a dialogue to help customers articulate their needs and then develop customized outputs to meet these needs. For example, one Japanese eyewear retailer developed a computerized system to help customers select eyewear. The system combines a digital image of the customer's face, and then various styles of eyewear are displayed on the digital image. Once the customer is satisfied, the customized glasses are produced at the retail store within an hour. Adaptive customizers. These organizations offer a standard product that customers can modify themselves, such as fast food hamburgers, ketchup, etc., and closet organizers. Each closet organizer package is the same but includes instructions and tools to cut the shelving and clothes rods so that the unit can fit a wide variety of closet sizes. Cosmetic customizers. These organizations produce a standard product but present it differently to different customers. For example, Planters packages its peanuts and mixed nuts in a variety of containers on the basis of specific needs of its retailing customers, such as Walmart, 7-Eleven, and Safeway. Transparent customizers. These organizations provide custom products without the customers knowing that a product has been customized for them. For example, Amazon.com provides book recommendations based on information about past purchases. Example: Hewlett-Packard, faced with increasing pressure from its customers for quicker order fulfillment and for more highly customized products, Hewlett-Packard, HP, wondered whether it was really possible to deliver mass-customized products rapidly, while at the same time continuing to reduce costs. Feitzinger and Lee, 1997. HP's approach to mass customization can be summarized as effectively delaying tasks that customize a product as long as possible in the product supply process. It is based on the following 3 principles. Products should be designed around a number of independent modules that can be easily combined in a variety of ways. Manufacturing tasks should also be designed and performed as independent modules that can be relocated or rearranged to support new production requirements. The product supply process must perform 2 functions. First, it must cost-effectively supply the basic product to the locations that complete the customization activities. Second, it must have the requisite flexibility to process individual customers' orders. HP has discovered that modular design provides 3 primary benefits. First, components that differentiate the product can be added during the later stages of production. This method of mass customization, generally called postponement, is one form of the assemble-to-order production process, discussed in more detail in Chapter 3. For example, the company designed its printers so that country-specific power supplies are combined with the printers at local distribution centers and actually plugged in by the customer when the printer is set up. Second, production time can be significantly reduced by simultaneously producing the required modules. Third, producing in modules facilitates the identification of production and quality problems. Responsiveness. The competitive advantages of faster, dependable response to new markets or to the individual customer's needs have occasionally been noted in the business media. Eisenhart and Brown 1998, Stock 1988, Vesey 1991. For example, in a study of the U.S. Japanese robotics industry, the National Science Foundation found that the Japanese tend to be about 25% faster than Americans, and to spend 10% less, in developing and marketing new robots. The major difference is that the Americans spend more time and money on marketing, whereas the Japanese spend 5 times more than the Americans on developing more efficient production methods. Identifies a number of prerequisites for and advantages of fast, dependable response. These include higher quality, faster revenue generation, and lower costs through elimination of overhead, reduction of inventories, greater efficiency, and fewer errors and scrap. One of the most important but least recognized advantages for managers is that by responding faster, they can allow a customer to delay an order until the exact need is known. Thus, the customer does not have to change the order, a perennial headache for most operations managers. Faster response to a customer also can, up to a point, reduce the unit costs of the product or service, sometimes significantly. On the basis of empirical studies reported by Meredith et al., 1994, and illustrated in, it seems that there is about a 2:1 relationship between response time and unit cost. That is, starting from typical values, an 80% reduction in response time results in a corresponding 40% reduction in unit cost. The actual empirical data indicated a range between about and, so for an 80% reduction in response time there could be a cost reduction from a high of 80% equals 48% to a low of 16%. Prerequisites for and advantages of rapid response: cost reductions with decreases in response time. This is an overwhelming benefit because if corresponding price reductions are made, it improves the value delivered to the customer through both higher responsiveness and lower price. The result for the producer is a much higher market share. If the producer chooses not to reduce the price, then the result is both higher margins and higher sales, for significantly increased profitability. Chapter 12: Strategy and Competitiveness. Competitiveness can be defined in a number of ways. We may think of it as the long-term viability of a firm or organization, or we may define it in a short-term context such as the current success of a firm in the marketplace as measured by its market share or its profitability. We can also talk about the competitiveness of a nation, in the sense of its aggregate competitive success in all markets. The U.S. President's Council on Industrial Competitiveness gave this definition in 1985. Competitiveness for a nation is the degree to which it can, under free and fair market conditions, produce goods and services that meet the test of international markets while simultaneously maintaining and expanding the real incomes of its citizens. Global trends: the United States provides a graphic example of global trade trends. The trend in merchandise trade for the United States is startling. Although some might think that foreign competition has been taking markets away from you. Producers only in the past decade, U.S. merchandise imports have grown considerably for over 30 years. Although exports have increased over this period as well, they have not increased as fast as imports. The result is an exploding trade deficit with foreign countries. Partly as a result of this deficit, the United States is now the biggest debtor nation in the world, with a cumulative deficit of about $5 trillion, nearly half of the U.S. annual gross domestic product, GDP, and an annual deficit running about 6% of GDP. However, these values hold only for the period up to mid-2008, when the global financial/credit/recession crisis started. It now appears that all these figures will become much worse, not for just the United States, but globally. Another important issue relating to the financial crisis involves the exchange rate between currencies. Let's consider in more detail what it means when a country's currency declines in value relative to foreign currencies. A weaker currency means that citizens in that country will have to pay more for products imported from foreign countries. Meanwhile, the prices for products produced in that country and exported to foreign countries will decline, making them more desirable. Thus, a decline in the value of a country's currency is a double-edged sword. Such a decline makes imported goods more expensive for citizens to purchase, but at the same time makes exports less expensive for foreign consumers, increasing the demand for domestic products. As an example, let's consider the American dollar. In the financial crisis of 2008, the dollar grew stronger as Americans sold foreign assets and foreigners rushed to hold assets in the dollar, the world's strongest currency. As well as a reserve, commodities are priced in dollars, currency. However, given the massive amount of dollars the U.S. government borrowed and created to overcome the financial crisis, there is widespread concern that the dollar may weaken or even collapse in the future. According to economic theory, a stronger dollar should make American products less desirable, or competitive, in foreign markets and imports more desirable in American markets. However, some market actions that governments and businesses often take to keep from losing customers can alter this perfect economic relationship. For instance, in the 1990s, when the price of Japanese products in the United States started increasing in terms of dollars, Japanese firms initiated huge cost-cutting drives to reduce the cost, and thereby the dollar price, of their products, to keep from losing American customers, which was largely successful. Similarly, China controls the exchange rate of its currency, the renminbi, to stay at about 7 to the dollar, though they have been letting it strengthen recently, so it always sells its goods at a competitive price. In the last decade, particularly with the economic rise of China and India, global markets, manufacturers, and service producers have evolved in a dramatic fashion. With the changes occurring in the World Trade Organization, WTO, international competition has grown very complex in the last 2 decades. Previously, firms were domestic, exporters, or international. A domestic firm produced and sold in the same country. An exporter sold goods, often someone else's, abroad. An international firm sold domestically produced as well as foreign-produced goods both domestically and in foreign countries. However, domestic sales were usually p. That is the heart of Operations Management for MBAs, 5th edition. If it helped, a quick subscribe keeps more summaries coming. So how do quality and operations connect? That is exactly where we started. Go back to the top and watch it click into place.